Cool. So, morning, everyone. Thanks very much for joining us. My name's Costa, and I am from Sophos. I'm a cybersecurity consultant, and I deal predominantly with our enterprise and public space customers. And Adam, yourself?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Adam McCaig. I'm head of cybersecurity at Bytes Software Services. I have responsibility for a team who support our customers with decisions around security strategy and security operations.
Awesome. And I guess just for context, everyone, what we're planning to do today, this isn't a webinar where we're going to flick through loads of slides. We have got slides just to support what we're talking about, but really the idea of this is it's meant to be a bit of a fireside chat between two professionals. I'm going to put professionals there in air quotes, just to give you our opinion on what we're seeing with our customers, the kind of conversations that we're having, and ultimately how we see that impacting what we do as cybersecurity professionals for organizations moving forwards. So yeah, let's get started. I guess first point of conversation, we're going to go straight in with this one, aren't we, Adam? We couldn't help ourselves with bring ChatGPT in, could we?
No, I think it's the elephant in the room, and it's something that I'm certainly asked a lot about by customers. So rather than tease everyone, let's talk about it now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we can't avoid it. There are literally news articles being spun up every day. I think every time I'm listening to the radio recently as well, there's interviews about whether it's university students being told how they can use it. People think it's going to affect their jobs. Has there been a potential leaked vulnerability from something that somebody didn't protect properly from the software itself? We literally can't get away from it. And I think because it's on everybody's minds, I think from our perspective, we've got the concern about what it means for security, right? We've got customers who are thinking how they protect themselves against it, how they can leverage it moving forwards. But I think more importantly, they're worried about how it can affect them long term, right?
Absolutely. I mean, the first thing to air as part of this conversation is certainly that generative AI, ChatGPT, and others represent huge opportunities for organisations to improve productivity and really accelerate things like software development life cycles. The issue is that these AI models also provide those opportunities to bad actors. One of the questions I'm most often asked is, has generative AI, ChatGPT, and the like really changed the risk landscape that we're all working in? And that's a really interesting question to try and answer. From my side, I think it hasn't changed the risk landscape very much in terms of the type of attack or threat we face, but it's certainly done something for the volume of high quality attacks that we're potentially exposed to.
Yeah, can absolutely agree with that. And I think we've seen that reflected quite a lot recently with the types of breaches and attacks that we have seen. But I think from my perspective, one of the things that we spoke about for years from a Sophos piece is talk about the threat landscape, and we used to talk about ransomware as a service. People would go into the dark web, they'd sign up to something, we used to joke about SLAs for a piece of malware that takes advantage of a vulnerability. Well, actually, is this the modern day version of that? If you go into ChatGPT, it's supposed to have boundaries as to what it can and can't tell you. But I think I saw a piece the other day where it said, what websites should I avoid getting certain types of downloads from, for example? And it listed out all of the downloads that when it was asked previously how I can get, effectively freeware, it said that it can't answer that question. So I think more and more people will be finding ways around it to get access to information that they previously probably wouldn't have given access to. And actually, they don't need to be high-skilled engineers anymore, do they? They can literally just use an AI engine to kind of find a way in for a vulnerability or an operating system or similar, whereas previously they might have had to do a little bit more digging than they do today.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's sped up the ability for bad actors to bring malware out into the wild. It's given the opportunity to validate their code more quickly. And I think we've moved from ransomware as a service to a self-service ransomware model because of things like generative AI. I'll come back to the earlier point, though. I don't think that's changed what we're trying to defend against. I just think we're seeing a greater number of higher quality attacks. So we're seeing less bad attacks, that are easier to prevent. So it does mean we need to think about the efficacy of our controls and our mitigations. But I don't think it's made a big change as to what type of mitigation or control we need to put in place. I think we should say, and we shouldn't lay this all at ChatGPT's door. There are other generative AI models out there. They all present similar challenges. The guardrails around the different models are similarly untested, I would say. And I think the worst example of an untested AI system is actually in a really common application that lots of youngsters use in Snapchat. And their AI model has been shown by researchers to actually be definitely experimental, openly admitted, actually provide some really some answers with really poor ethics attached. So we shouldn't lay it all at ChatGPT and the OpenAI project, but I think the same is true. And they're obviously the model which has brought AI and generative AI to mainstream and the wider public.
Yeah, I think that's probably the key word there, isn't it? That it's been brought now to mainstream. More people are suddenly aware of it than they have ever been before. ChatGPT's on variant, what is it, 3 so far or more? So there have been engines and versions of this before, but it wasn't publicly available in the same way.
What
Sorry.
Before we move on from AI, I think one of the areas that's often overlooked around these types of models, certainly in the conversations that I've been having, are around the data loss prevention risk. Personally, I think there's a greater risk to our customers and organisations around their ability to easily lose data into those generative AI models as people ask questions, maybe upload code, as happened with the large electronics company over their semiconductor design, and these AI models can then provide your own intellectual property back out to the wider public. So, yes, there's the risk of malware writing, or the ability for AI to co-opt other machines to deliver greater scales of attack. But I think we should always give view to data loss prevention as well around these things, and controlling what our staff and employees are able to enter in as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have no doubt that there's going to start being policies around how it gets used in the workplace. It's not just something around, cheating on your homework. It's going to be a case of not cheating on how to do your job, but exactly what you just described. You train it with your information. It is proprietary information. Then there's the risk that you're exposing that in the more long term. I think the only other
Absolutely.
point I wanted to add here really is coming back to a university point. Students are being asked how they're using it to proofread their work, get answers to questions, and similar. And if you do apply that back to the likes of social engineering, I guess it can be viewed that it can be writing more genuine types of emails, more genuine types of texts. If you're trying to introduce yourself, people are using it to build out introductory emails and talk tracks and sales pitches, etc. So we've got to view that as actually the types of emails that we will receive from a phishing campaign perspective, or any other social engineering tactic from this, will ultimately become harder and harder to perceive and understand whether it's been written by AI or if it is indeed a human that's written it on the other side of it. So
Mhm.
a lot of things that are ultimately going on. And I think we've probably done the AI piece to death at this point, but probably the one that comes up for everybody's conversation at this point for sure.
Absolutely. I suppose we should talk about the wider threat landscape then, not just the AI threat landscape.
Yeah.
Um,
I've got a couple here. So cookies in a jar, and people are probably wondering what cookies in a jar are about. And picture around macros and OneNote in the bottom right-hand corner. So this to me kind of really goes back to show that somebody will always find another tactic or another way to continue to exploit something. So I think it was earlier this year, or maybe even the start of the end of last year, macros were disabled from Microsoft in Word documents and Excel by default. It was something that was pushed out as an update. And so actually organizations that had previously allowed macros to run by default or similar were actually technically a bit more secure in that they were stopping those types of activity happening. And so people who were leveraging exploit filled macro documents now had to find another way or another type of document that they could send out. And funny enough, another Microsoft application, OneNote. OneNote started to get taken advantage of, where people were embedding ISO files, image files, batch files. And the thing that got me was how difficult I thought it would be to inject code into OneNote. But actually, people were literally dragging and dropping files and putting a picture on top of them that says click here. And all it would do would pass through the click to whatever the embedded content was behind. And that to me really goes to show that AI aside, there's always going to be a vulnerability that can be taken advantage of. Somebody will always find the other backdoor in. And actually, funnily enough, Microsoft last week decided to stop allowing embedded content by default for OneNote as well. So I'm sure we'll find another application that will start to be the go-to, as it were.
Feels
Um,
like PowerPoint might be that application.
yeah, and yeah, I don't know. Have we got any embedded content in this? Let's not find out. But then there's the one in the top left-hand corner, cookies. This one was a massive talk track for, and still is, with some of my customers who have been concerned around what happened to Linus Tech Tips, massive YouTube channel. He posted a video of himself online, basically running around trying to stop somebody from logging in and deleting all of his videos, and using some of his other YouTube channels to actually promote. I think it was basically some mining Bitcoin pieces, and it was all fraud. And so all of his accounts started to get taken down. And all it came down to was somebody had again found a different method of gaining credentials, getting around MFA, getting around knowing the password by actually compromising a device and stealing cookies from a browser. So again, technology gets added, technology protects against certain things, but actually coming back to the point of AI, it will just get easier and easier for these high quality types of threats to take advantage of the exploits. And it's something that we really need to be quite aware of, I think.
Absolutely. I think as we kind of, well, actually, you talk about 3CX because you've been closer to that than I have.
Yeah, no worries. So again, guys, this isn't meant to really be a presentation, but just some key talking points for some of the things that we've seen. I don't know if everybody on the call has seen what happened to the 3CX vulnerability, where effectively their updating repository was compromised. So again, trying to find ways of getting into people's infrastructure. We saw it with Kaseya a few years ago. Somebody found a vulnerable application that lots of people use, and use that as a means to actually get into businesses where they would otherwise struggle. So no need to phish people, no need to breach their firewall, take advantage of an application that's in there, and ultimately deliver a multi-stage supply chain attack. And that's kind of one of the things that we'll talk about a little bit later on when it comes to tools. I've always said, don't exclude an application for the sake of it. Don't exclude it from behavioral-based mitigations just because the third party told you that's what needs to happen. If you left 3CX open without any exploit checking, just think of all the things it could have done in somebody's environment, anywhere from data exfiltration to ransomware attempts, which we saw in the wild as well.
It's a really good point, and I think something we've certainly experienced is the rapid maturity around application security. So a lot of organisations are now looking at their kind of AppSec and DevSecOps processes in with much more urgency than previously, and I think that's right. To your point, people are being creative with how they use applications that we present to the world, and how to exploit those and get through those beyond kind of the OWASP top 10, into some of the things you've spoken about there with, updates and the like. So that AppSec area is something that's really coming on quite a bit. I don't suppose that means that all of our old favourites have gone away though, Kostas. So ransomware still huge. I think we've observed some statistics and some research which have said that potentially the ransomware industry, if we can call it that, is changing slightly, more focused, more targeted, bigger excuse me, bigger paydays for that industry, and moving away from should we call it spray and pray, into more focused attacks, but the types of techniques they're using, the types of controls and mitigations we can put in place remain the same. I think we've also seen quite a lot, and a lot of discussion around the kind of more social engineering attacks, be that through phishing, be that through credential harvesting. This is still really high up there in terms of people, conversations I've had with customers about building a culture about good AI, good security practice, where AI fits into that in terms of modeling risk and supporting our users and colleagues with how they look out for and identify those types of attacks.
Yeah, and this is a common talk track that we have pretty much every year, right? The exploits aren't going away. There is always going to be somebody who's going to get through, get some payday or money out of this. And I think the fact that ransomware is still so prevalent, I think a lot of people almost expected that it would go away when people started moving to the cloud. But actually, you put core documents in the cloud, sure, and that might be held against you from a data exfiltration perspective. But a lot of businesses still keep core proprietary information on servers or data centers that are local to them, so they've got quicker access, or indeed have got big applications hosting them. So we really can't dismiss the fact that ransomware is still an issue, even if it is probably a bit of a boring topic by now. But I think I'm glad, and we've got the BBC News clipping there. I'm glad that we get more traction about this kind of stuff being talked about. Felt like after WannaCry, people kind of peaked and then started to lose interest again in cybersecurity
Yeah.
because it wasn't so widespread. But I know we also hit the other side of this, which is noise fatigue for how much is happening. But I am glad now that it is more of a core thing that people are trying to keep up with. I say trying because let's be real about life, it's very difficult to keep up with all of these things. But yeah.
So certainly more. I mean, I don't think the world we live in and the world we enjoy has ever been quite so mainstream. We pick the BBC here as a news site to evidence kind of the number of stories relating to breaches or different types of security risks or incidents that have gone on, but we could have picked any news channel. I think in terms of the threat landscape and the risks we face, both as businesses and individuals, I've certainly been keeping an eye on what's been happening with the Uber case that's on that screen grab. The former head of security at Uber has managed to escape jail, but has had to pay a significant amount of money, and will be spending many hundreds of hours delivering community service because of the way they hid that ransomware payment a few years ago.
Breach number 3 that they've hit now, something like that.
Yeah, it's never ending. I mean, let's not badmouth Uber too much, but it can happen to us all.
Absolutely.
But I think that it's really interesting that we've moved beyond in the mainstream media. Company X lost X data or was hit by X £1 million loss, and we've moved into stories about how individuals are affected and how individuals are liable for these types of problems. And I think as we move our conversation on, we'll talk a bit more about how delivering security is never been more challenging. And I think that's really interesting as a backdrop to that conversation too.
Yeah, and I've just put this in as a bit of a pun here at this point. We've talked about AI a lot, and is it going to be the case that we're expecting everybody to have an AI tool set, and is it going to be a case of whose AI is bigger than the other AI in order to have these breaches occur? I think really and truly, all it's really done, almost rounding out that conversation, is just reinforce everything that we need to know at this point, which is security is constantly changing. There's always something to keep up with. And I think the keeping up with it is probably, as it always has been, the most difficult part. And now it happens so quick that if you don't have dedicated resources, don't have dedicated teams looking at it, don't have time, you and I get the pleasure of not having to combat these day to day, right? We get to read about them at our leisure. Being on the hard side of that is going to be quite difficult.
I think on the which AI robot is better discussion that you've introduced there, I think the positive is that the cybersecurity industry is probably, if not the best, certainly one of the best at the utilization of AI and machine learning to do threat detection, to do behavioral analysis, to really support human professionals with speed and accuracy and data modeling. We've been doing it for years. If there is a risk, it's that the bad guys are now catching up, and we as an industry need to keep investing in being that one step ahead.
Yeah, I agree with that. And yeah, like you say, it's not all doom and gloom, right? AI, machine learning engines have been part of security products and solutions for a long time. There is no way that people would have been able to keep up with all the threats and trends if everybody was constantly reverse engineering malware themselves. Even when you consider a simple sandboxing solution, that's not a human going and reverse engineering something. That is having a tool set do it for you. And we're just taking steps going along that. And you'll see more and more vendors that will adopt those methods. They'll probably use some of the big name brands there just to almost get a bit of clout that they're using a specific type of AI. But in the background, the reality is they've had multiple machine learning engines for a very, very long time. I know us at Sophos, we've had plenty of them, even just in the endpoint piece, let alone all of the email and firewall models and some of our detection handling at some of the other places. So yeah, it's not something we should be too concerned about, but definitely something we should keep our wits about as well.
So this is my big talk track at the moment with customers. I'm spending a lot of time supporting, and the rest of my team are as well, supporting customers around conversations about efficiency and effectiveness of security programs. I think the economic climate has put a lot of focus into demonstrating effective spend within security and really delivering value and return on investment within the security stack. It's really hard to demonstrate value through not suffering an incident, because that could or could not be as a result of your spend. But a number of themes have come through. One is around the number of security tools that the businesses have accumulated and collected, looking at efficiency of each and the effectiveness of each, or moving to platform plays with technology providers like Sophos, or looking at how to simplify the skill set required, because we're still in the midst of a cyber skills gap. Some statistics on the screen there about was it 60-something% of organizations have an open gap in their skill set within their employee count. So this is really an area that I think we're seeing the industry really do a better job of talking around, doing a better job of talking about how we deliver information to boards about risk and what we're exposed to and what that really means for the organization in terms of exposure. Really starting to make strides through some of the platform that are available and the portfolios of technology where we can reduce the different types of skills we need to run our security programs. This is almost every conversation I have at the moment is around how do we demonstrate value to the board, how do we simplify, how do we turn 40 tools into 20, and then from 20 how do we turn that into 10. And it's a real area of for us as an industry to support our customers, I believe.
Yeah, it's quite shocking actually when you think about the number of tools that people have invested in, and they've invested in at the time because they thought it was the answer to a problem, right? It was the solution for something that they were trying to get around, whether it was a piece of backup technology, an MFA or identity provider or similar. But all of those suddenly add up to a lot of management overhead. And one of the things that struck me for a lot of the conversations I've had recently is when you go back to a business and say, well, A, how many tools have you got? Not that that's really the problem, but B, what are you doing with that data? How often are you checking in? Are you feeding it into a SIEM solution? Great, you're grabbing those logs, but what are you doing with them proactively? And
Mm,
proving that from a value perspective, like you say, going back to board or even looking for investment in further headcount and similar is really, really difficult when actually a lot of people don't know the tools that they've got, aren't getting the value out of what they've got in the first place.
yeah,
And that cybersecurity skills gap is probably one of the main reasons for that. I'm speaking as somebody who, I'm 35 years old and I did 15 years in IT and infrastructure and security roles. And that was experience over 15 years. And most people in the IT industry generally have the kind of first line support, second line support, third line deployment piece. Cybersecurity roles from the out have always been lacking. They're only starting to come to the fore now where people are going, right, cybersecurity degrees or cybersecurity apprenticeships or, entry level analysts so that they can build experience. But there's still a lot of us in the industry which ultimately have been in it for 10, 15 years, got great technological experience, but we're never threat hunters. So it doesn't matter how good you are
yeah.
with the tech, doesn't matter how much experience you've still got a lot of learning to do.
Absolutely, and it's really easy to talk about the cybersecurity skills gap, but it misses the point slightly in that we've got skills gaps in lots of different types of role.
Yeah.
In analysts, in threat hunting, in firewall engineering, in risk management, in data and privacy governance. They all fall into that gap, and I'm not sure I've ever met an end user organization who say they're fully staffed with no gap that they wouldn't want another head for. And the ways in which I think we can look to address some of that and support customers, seeing lots of organizations looking at, as I've mentioned already, simplifying the technology stack to fewer portfolios or platforms. So not and consolidation has often been mistaken for heading for one platform. I think actually when you look at some of the statistics about mid-sized organizations having 40 or 50 security tools on average, global conglomerates and enterprise having 100. Actually, if we just can we halve it? Can we take 20% out? Can we do some level of simplification so that we get better value? I think there are tools which work really well in terms of they support other tools, and you don't need a lot of human investment for them to deliver value. But you come back to if we're not making decisions based on this data, if we're not using the data to make decisions about our risk profile or how well we're delivering security, then does beg a question: what are we using it for? I think, and are we getting good value out of it? See organisations looking at outsourcing departments. We mentioned the different types of skills. A number of different organisations are looking at the security operations space, so threat hunting, security analysis, detection and incident management and response, and saying maybe services are the better way to do this. Maybe we should focus our headcount in building that old school traditional castle, and we'll let somebody else be the security guards, because then we can focus our investment in headcount on a particular skill set, build more resilience in our functions internally.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've got some quotes up on the screen here at this point, but I think really the main one of conversation is the Gartner one. 60% of organizations will basically be wanting to take direct MDR provider services by 2025. This keeps going up every year that they redo this. The percentage keeps going up because I think the demand for MDR service keeps going up. And almost coming back to your point, it's not just around what tools people are using. It's not just around the lack of skill set. It's people are getting to the point where actually can it be done better for them than them building it themselves in house? Outsourcing has always been a thing in the industry, whether it has been for desktop as a service and people imaging devices for you. But when it comes to the security posture of your whole environment, for somebody to have hands-on or eyes-on keyboard and data for you for all those tools that you've got, actually MDR providers they've got a bit of a gold mine under them at this point, because they're the ones who are looking at data, they're building and training the people to know what they're looking for, and ultimately they're the ones that are going to have the better security outcomes, because they're seeing and being more battle hardened than if an organization were to build a SOC for themselves and probably never actually see something overly suspicious that they've never seen before, that they would never be able to reverse engineer. Big MDR providers can do all of that, within a few seconds, based on what we were talking about before, right? With all the
Yeah.
data and machine learning engines that they've already built.
Yeah, I mean, with service provision, you've got some really obvious benefits around, the need, the 24/7 coverage without adding a headcount of 5 to 7 more staff to deliver that. But you've also got those slightly more abstract benefits around threat intelligence. You get that herd immunity of an MDR provider or a technology stack sharing threat intelligence and building protections for you into the service they're doing, because they've experienced it somewhere else. You've got a whole load of experience there that is greater than any one employee is going to bring if you bring them into the organization through the teams of people that you have access to through MDR provision. The managed detection and response piece, I find a lot of organizations looking to move towards. I think there's a slight problem with it as an industry, in that we don't define what managed detection and response, or MDR, is very well. It's a bit of a catch-all term, and I think I certainly like to go through use cases with organizations about what deliverables they really need to help find, to your point earlier, Kostas, where the value is in that service. Is that value in supporting a really high-skilled team when they're just absent from work? Is that value in threat hunting? Is that value in incident management? And there's a number of different facets here, which a number of organizations have different strengths. And I think that's really important that people bear in mind. There are multiple different flavors of MDR, and they go from kind of that single ecosystem, manage it for you type approach, or similar to how Sophos are evolving their offer with that more open architecture, where the MDR service can be a kind of force magnifier for investments that have already been made.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess I'm conscious of time at this point. So, firstly, guys, thanks for everybody for paying attention to us. Just chew the fat a little bit around the cybersecurity landscape. I guess just to close out, just worth saying, this wasn't meant to be a pitch of any way, shape, or form, but maybe Adam, worth you just talking a little bit around what you guys do from a offering of services to your customers.
Yeah, absolutely. So very, very quickly, as I'm sure most people on the call are aware of the breadth of Bytes cybersecurity portfolio, but that includes things like our cyber consultancy practice, who can help with strategy and audit and assurance advice, very well known for our solutions portfolio, supporting customers with finding and accessing the right types of technologies to meet their use cases. And then we've got our insights program, of which this forms a part, where we like to try and add value back into the security community. And I missed our services platform, but we work with a number of different service providers, Sophos being a really key provider in that portfolio, to help provide options for people to deliver that kind of effectiveness through outsourcing.
Cheers, Adam. And I guess just for my bit here to top and tail the conversation, we've talked a lot around services. And one of the things that we've got as a Sophos strapline this year is cybersecurity as a service. And I think one of the unique things that allows us to deliver that with great security outcomes at this point is that we're not just looking at Sophos data. We're not alert monitoring. We're not just waiting for a high risk score to come in of a detection for us to do something. This is a proactive threat hunting and incident response service that also now includes the ability to take in third-party telemetry from your Fortinet, your Palo Altos, your Oktas, your Mimecast, to really give that more holistic view of the whole environment, rather than waiting for something to hit your more traditional EDR, MDR type providers where you're waiting for it to hit the endpoint or server. So, and I guess the great thing about that for me is ultimately the scale of which we do this at now. We've got over 20,000 customers on our MDR service, and kind of coming back to the point of doing things at scale when it comes to machine learning and being the one to pick up something for a customer and deliver it for somebody else means that we've got great mean time to detect, investigate, and remediate times. You can see on the screen there, and we back all of that up with service level agreements and targets to make sure all of our customers are being able to equally go back to the board to say, should this happen, should we have an incident, we can have our value being proved so that it's not just another tool, it's not just another service, but actually it can be viewed as that consolidation of services to deliver better security posture. And with that, I think it's kind of us at the end of time. We're going to get shouted at if we carry on any bit longer, aren't we? So
I mean, we could inevitably go on for another couple of hours, I think,
yeah,
if we had more coffee. But if anyone on the call wants to reach out and talk about any of the topics today, please do reach out to your Bytes or your Sophos account manager. I'm sure Kostas and myself were more than happy to jump on the phone and continue any of these discussions and how they fit in with your own organisation. So please don't be shy, because we definitely could keep going.
absolutely. And yeah, Adam, it's been great talking with you. So appreciate your time as well. And thanks everybody who's joined us.
Thank you, everyone.